on Water Policy on Thursday, October 24th at 11:30 is being called to order. We do have a quorum present, and our first item of business today is approval of the minutes from the July 15th meeting. Do I have a motion for their approval?
So moved.
Motion moved and for their approval. All those in favor, are there any comments, questions, or corrections before we vote? Hearing nothing, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No same sign. Motion's carried. Everyone, I would mention to you that we do have a very full agenda today. And so what I intend to do, all of our presenters today have been given a time period in which they are to do their presentation. And so I do intend to enforce that time presentation today in order that this meeting is adjourned by 1 o'clock. And so therefore, presenters, make sure you get the points made that you wish to early in your presentation. If there is any time remaining in your presentation, I will open it up to the committee for questions. If there is not time for questions at that point, we'll save them till the end of the meeting. And if there is no time then, I would ask the members to forward your questions to Mr. Stark, who will then forward them to the presenters and will in turn share their response, the questions and the response with us via email. So if there are no further questions at this point in time, I would turn the meeting over to Dr. Bob Tipping. Dr. Tipping is the new director of the Minnesota Geological Survey, and welcome to our committee. Dr. Tipping, you have 7 minutes and you may proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. So by way of introduction, oh, excuse me, I think you have to give me permission to share my screen.
You can share now.
Okay, so are you seeing that?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
All right. So my background, I'm a hydrogeologist by training. From 1988 to 2019, I was with Minnesota Geological Survey, where I am now again back at the MGS as director. From 2019 to 2024, I was with the Minnesota Department of Health in their source water protection unit, also doing hydrogeology. So the work that I did with MGS prior to going to MDH and while at MDH, there's a lot of overlap between the source water protection unit and the MGS. I went from being a map producer with MGS to a map user at MDH, and now coming back with that perspective of 5 years of being in the state agencies. I have hopefully some useful information to bring back to MGS and how we produce our products. Most of you are familiar with MGS via the County Atlas, County Geologic Atlas series, but our primary role at MGS is to provide information on the container. This is the piece that holds all our natural resources, including minerals and aggregates and water. And the maps that we produce show distribution of rock, sediment, and resources, and the databases that we make provide access to the information that those maps are based on. County Geologic Atlas program, again, the MGS is responsible for Part A, which is the container, the physical set. This is the current status as of May of this past year. We're closing in on completing the state. The images in maroon are complete. The ones in gold are underway and not started. There's a handful around the state that haven't been begun yet. The plan is to complete these within the next 10 years. Looking to the future, once the County Atlas program winds down, when I was at the Department of Health, we became involved in looking at watershed scale work. So this is the fundamental water resource scale for Minnesota water resources planning. This is the One Watershed, One Plan program. I wanted to focus in on a portion of this map down in the southeast. So you see Greater Zumbro River. Department of Health contracted with Minnesota Geological Survey to produce a subsurface geologic model. So not a groundwater model, but a subsurface geologic model of materials both bedrock and unconsolidated, which MGS did. This is what that model looks like. It may be a little hard to see, but I wanted to point out some features to you if you can see my cursor. So here's the watershed. Here's the city of Rochester, Highway 52 coming through it for reference. And what this image is showing are two things. One is the bedrock layers, which are these blues and yellow down below it. You can see them repeated on the bottom of the screen. The lowermost yellow layer on here is the Jordan sandstone, and up above it is the Prairie du Chien group, the two parts of the Prairie du Chien group shown in blue and lighter blue. And then the St. Peter sandstone above that, which is also an aquifer. And then I wanted to include this green layer here, which is the Decorah Shale. And what the Decorah Shale is doing in this case is providing basically a roof over the top of the Prairie du Chien and the Jordan, limiting the amount of water that can get down to those units. And then on top of that, shown in these brown dots, is clayey material. So the purpose of this picture was to show what the model looks like, but also with reference to groundwater and groundwater quality, in particular, groundwater residence time. And what I mean by that is, if I took a sample, if you can see my cursor over here in the southwest from a Jordan well, that water would probably not have recharged in the last 50 years. It has this roof, this green bedrock Decorah Shale on top of it. In addition to that, it also has thick glacial till shown by these brown dots. If we go out to the east and we end up in the area of Plainview and the like, downstream in the Zumbro watershed, that roof of Decorah Shale is gone. The clay material is fairly sparse. And what we find then is if we took a Jordan sample from the city of Plainview here, we'd see more recent water. That means it has elevated chloride, it has some nitrate in it, things that wouldn't be the same if we looked at the same water over here. So the purpose of this slide, again, is to illustrate what the subsurface looks like and how it affects the movement of water. So that's pretty much what I wanted to do, is just introduce you to what we see as some of the future work that MGS could be involved in at this watershed scale. It's a way to stitch together county atlases that were done at one period in time, and this is a way to now apply it to the planning scale for state type work in water resources. Last thing I'll mention very quickly is that the County Atlas program is driven by county participation. So these counties all were interested in having an atlas done. The same way that these watershed models are being proposed is that there first is an interest from the local water planning groups, soil water conservation districts, in having this kind of model done. That's why this watershed was chosen. And that's it for my formal presentation. If you would have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Tipping. Anyone have a quick question? Don't see any hands right now. Very good. Next,
Mr. Chair, it's back to me, I think, and I just want to mention that I know that Dr. Tipping's appointment to this position was a long process, and he's very well qualified and knows a lot about this state and the geology, so he's a great candidate. Just very quickly, I want to give you a recap on the field trip that we had in August to the Upper Mississippi River Basin. We looked at several things. We looked at irrigation and water issues in Little Rock Creek and along the Straight River. The second day, then, we focused on deep cold water lakes, and I want to give you a quick update of that. Little Rock Creek, shown here, we had a good turnout at that meeting at Prairie Farms. An update, the DNR Commissioner's Order has issued a Commissioner's Order to protect the ecology of Little Rock Creek. It recognizes that water use has a negative impact on the stream ecosystem. It establishes a sustainable diversion limit for Little Rock Creek, and it provides an opportunity for permit holders to submit plans to resolve the conflict. At this point, it withholds consideration of applicants for additional water use. And more recently than the meeting, the DNR has now engaged a consulting firm to work with the irrigators on a path forward. Jason Meckel is here from the DNR to answer questions if we have time about that issue. And then the Straight River, we also had a really good turnout at the Offutt Corporation. I think about nearly 100 people in the audience for that presentation and tour of the Straight River. Along those lines, and we'll hear more about this today, the DNR has issued a report saying that groundwater use is having a minimal effect on stream flow. In addition, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has a new report suggesting that nitrate is impacting the ecology of the river, and we're going to hear from both of those agencies today. With this, I'll turn the rest of this presentation over to Ms. Mathisrud, who's going to talk about day 2 of the field trip. Crystal, are you there? There you are.
I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for giving me a few minutes of your time today. I am looking for the share button real quick.
Probably down on the bottom, a green button.
I found it here. So, okay. And my slideshow should come up, and I believe if I click this button, it'll start from the beginning. Are you seeing my slideshow now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So my purpose of being here today is to connect the 2024 water tour experience and observations of the priority lakes to forward-looking goals, reaffirm the rationale for the project of headwaters, streams, and priority lakes, and preview a white paper that we've been working on to answer the questions to fully explain our methodologies and rationale for the project and the expected costs to meet those goals. So when we were on the tour in the upper part of the upper Mississippi Basin where we're primarily chains of lakes connected and fed by these streams that provide the source water for most of Minnesota's larger populated cities. And this is just a quick breakdown of those streams and the percent of water flowing into the metro area water supply. This image is the upper Mississippi Basin highlighted in colors for our protection and restoration zones. The green zones are where we think protection makes the most sense, and yellow is where we need protection and restoration, and so on into the red zones. Our process to select the priority lakes does include local priorities and existing data, as we talked about. The blue and red dots on this map are the priority lakes that we've identified and have begun working on, trying to develop lake plans and processes for protection and managing the land, so no more than 25% of the land is disturbed at a time. We're currently working on 36 total lakes. We expect that there will be 60 to 80 across the whole basin once we're done, and all those One Watershed One plans are in place. Now, this slide and the next one is the preliminary data showing the priority lakes all the way to the left. And as you go across the lake data, the current amount of protected and disturbed lands, and then the goal acres and estimated cost to protect to 75% or 60% on those two far left columns. On this, oops, I should go back. I skipped a slide. Sorry about that. So on this particular slide at the bottom, if you can see the second to the right column, the total cost to protect through rim easements to 75% would be $82,270,000 at current land prices. If we were aiming to protect to 60%, the cost would only be $28,104,000. And then we would need to achieve the water quality protection in that remaining 15% by land management. So if we're thinking about that and looking at the tools for moving the needle to 75%, if we start at the bottom of this triangle, forest stewardship plans and cost share is how people usually start working on managing their land with us. And that sometimes includes timber harvest, and timber harvest can be included in land management that is protective of water quality if we're careful to think about how we're protecting the water quality. As you step up, you get into these programs where there's a covenant or there's a permanent agreement, such as in the easements. When we're talking about that 80 million or 28 million to reach protection, we're talking about using conservation easements and then utilizing the lower steps to get people into the process. And if we were to work toward the 60% protection with easements, then we would want to achieve the management with some of these other steps below and integrate ag land practices as well. And that is all that I have to present for the data. I want to let you know that we do have this white paper in the works and expect to have it coming out this winter, along with our booklet that we would like to send out reviewing our water tour that we went on. If anyone has any questions or items they'd like to include in the booklet, I'm happy to discuss by email or connect you with Pete or Dan or Mitch, who have been involved in the project and dealing with the data. If I were to have a legislative request to help us meet this goal, I'd say let's look at that data and the required protection and how we would like to intend to meet it. And if we were to choose the 60% protection level, and the state would be willing to allocate $10 million as seed money toward doing the protection with easements toward that 60% protection goal, we could deploy those funds in thirds through DNR Forest for the Future, Bowser Rim, Reinvest in Minnesota easements, and our partnering NGOs like Minnesota Land Trust and Northern Waters Land Trust on the ground here. Those partnerships really help us serve the people and meet our goals better because we have different capabilities and different reasons different landowners are attracted to these programs. And with that, I just want to thank you all so much for your time today and on the tour, and for bearing with us on the tour through the technical difficulties we had with the equipment on the bus and everything. We really had a great time, and I learned a lot from the conversations on the bus tour as well. And thank you. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Ms. Mathis-Ruud, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you and your staff, as well as Jim, for all the effort that you put in for the tour. It was certainly a worthwhile event. And we have just a short time left. Are there any questions for either Mr. Stark or Ms. Mathis-Ruud on this particular issue? Seeing none, we will then turn to the Straight River update. And we have with us today Jason Meckel from the DNR and Kevin Stroom from the MPCA, who are allowed 10 minutes each to talk about their respective reports regarding this issue. And we will start out with Mr. Meckel.
Mr. Chair, if I could, just as a closing to Ms. Mathis-Ruud's presentation, at the Clean Water Council meeting on Monday, we heard a detailed presentation on what she summarized here, and I think the Clean Water Council members were very appreciative and feel that this is a good effort, and I expect we will be hearing more from them as they roll up their budget process to the legislature. And with that, Mr. Chair, Jason, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Just kind of confirm you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, super. Well, I'm going to try to give you all the nickel tour of a 62-page report that we summarized and talked about while we were on the bus. I know many of you were there, but some of you were not able to be there. I do want to invite you to check out this report on our website. I've got the cover page for the report that we issued in April of 2024. And just as a reminder, let's see if I can get this to advance here. The DNR established the Straight River Groundwater Management Area in 2017. And the driving force behind that was that, for one, we had some new authority the legislature gave us to establish groundwater management areas. Number two, we looked at areas of the state where there was intensive groundwater use, and we were hearing from stakeholders and citizens about concerns about the sustainability of that groundwater use, or we had other information that suggested there was reasons that these were good areas to focus on and sort of figure out how do we manage this water resource given all the various number of users and the importance of that groundwater supply to the various communities involved. So the other groundwater management areas are the North and East Metro. One of the driving issues there, of course, is White Bear Lake, and then there's the PFAS issues. Another one that we have is the Bonanza Valley out in southwest or west central Minnesota, and then, of course, the Straight River. In that Straight River groundwater management area, we identified a number of things that would help us in the management of this resource. And one of those was to increase the monitoring, but also to do a comprehensive analysis of all the monitoring data that we have available. And that's what this report summarizes. And I'm going to summarize this report, but I want to start by saying that I can say with a high degree of confidence that the Straight River may be, or probably is, the most intensely monitored stream system, aquifer system that we have in the state. And so I just want to give you a few numbers to kind of hold in your mind as you're listening to this information, because there's a tremendous amount of nuance that we tried to describe in this report that goes beyond just these summary points. But we have 7 continuous stream gauges on the Straight River itself. We have 59 groundwater monitoring wells in the Straight River groundwater management area. We have 2 climate stations. We have 6 lakes that we are monitoring water levels on. We have 2 wetlands that we are now monitoring the hydrology on. And in partnership with the MGS, we've completed 3 county geologic atlases that will be incredibly useful to understanding more about these aquifers and how this water moves over time. So with that said, the summary here is that the summer stream flows at the lower end of the Straight River have shown no real discernible downward trend. The aquifer levels have been stable, and they are resilient through this extensive period of record. We are not concerned that the current amount of groundwater use is threatening the safety of those aquifers or the sustainability of pumping from those aquifers to continue to be able to supply water. So that means that water levels go down, but they rebound. They go down and they rebound. And they're not going down in such a way that there's a long-term trend or that we're causing interferences with other wells. And as was discussed on the bus tour, the Straight River area is a very somewhat unique area from an aquifer standpoint, incredibly prolific and benefiting tremendously from the amount of recharge that happens in some of the forested areas that surround it. All of the stream flow data that we analyzed, I will say though, includes a period of irrigation water use. So what do I mean by that? It means that when we're statistically evaluating the data, we don't have what we'd think of as a true before and a true after. What we have is all just a period of use. So the final point that I'm going to make about that is that the only way that we can really quantify the effect of irrigation water use, which is the primary use here, the only way we can quantify that in terms of how it's affecting stream flow is to develop a groundwater model, similar to the one that we've developed at Little Rock Creek or like what we've developed and used around White Bear Lake. There is a groundwater modeling effort that is underway. The University of Minnesota is working through with an LCCMR grant on a groundwater model, and that groundwater model will likely give some insight to what's happening with groundwater in the area. But it wasn't developed, and to our understanding is not being developed in the way that it would provide the sort of resolution of stream flow that we used, for example, at Little Rock Creek, where we're looking at the amount of water that's being diverted away. So we anticipate that there'll be some ongoing work here down the road. And lastly, I just wanted to say about the geologic atlases. These are shallow confined aquifers. They are separated by thin, intermittent, and leaky confining layers that do create connections between the confined and the water table aquifers. And it's variable throughout. So it's a very complex system to try to understand. Fortunately, we've got a good deal of information that we've been gathering and will continue to gather to help us. So with that, I'm going to advance through the slides just to give you somewhat of a visual here. The area outlined in black is the groundwater management area. And one of the things that's really a defining feature here is you'll see this dashed line that kind of runs right through the middle of it. That is Straight Lake is kind of right there. So we've got this area that we call the upper or the Ponsford submanagement area. And then we've got the area that's the Park Rapids submanagement area. What's really apparent from this visual is that the Park Rapids submanagement area has been experiencing, most of the irrigation it's been experiencing has been the 1960s, the 1970s, and 1980s. Very few additional irrigation systems have been installed, relatively speaking, from the 1990s on. And as I said, most of the data that we have is really from the late 1980s, the 1990s, and so forth. So this area had existing irrigation long before the intensive monitoring began. The upper portion here, the Ponsford submanagement area, you can see by looking at the colors, lots of bluer shades. Those are more recent expansion of irrigation, but we've also more recently installed monitoring systems up there. So as that expansion moved up into that part of the watershed, we recognized the need to get some more information and installed some monitoring systems. So we've got a good system to monitor and a good basis to go forward. As I mentioned, part of the driving force here was that there was an increase in water use over time. That's what this graph is representing. And again, it's broken out by the Park Rapids submanagement area, the Ponsford submanagement area, and then we can see the total amount of groundwater use over time in gray. I want to focus a little bit on some of the stream flow information that I shared in terms of what we've concluded thus far. And where I've zoomed in on this map is in below Straight Lake, so the Park Rapids submanagement area. And what we're showing here in these colors, and you can see this in the report when you go to look at it, is that this portion of the river is gaining groundwater every mile of stream that goes as we go downstream. So there's a lot of groundwater inflow. You can see that by looking at this table on the right-hand side. I'm just going to point my mouse here straight at Straight Lake. We're measuring below the lake 19 cubic feet per second. By the time we get all the way down here to Highway 71 at the USGS gauge, we're measuring 53 cubic feet per second as an August median base flow. It's just an index flow that we use. So this section of the river is gaining a lot of groundwater. It's critical to this river system. In fact, this river is 94 to 97% all groundwater inflow. So we can understand the importance of knowing these connections. I mentioned no discernible trend. So here we're just looking at one of the many ways to look at stream flow, but this is the 5-year moving average, this yellow line, looking over a period of time. And there are cyclical trends, but no real discernible long-term trend that suggests that stream flow is trending much significantly downward from its historical values. Again, the caveat I want to keep reminding us is that this is a period of time in which we've already had a lot of irrigation systems installed. So we don't have a good read on what the flow was long before irrigation systems were installed. That's what a groundwater model would be able to help us with. This is just another one of these stream flow differences. And so here's one way of us looking at changes over time. And I'm just going to focus you, given the short amount of time we have today, on the percent difference. So what we're seeing is single digit, perhaps, percent differences in flow. So slightly lower flow over time in the Straight River. The key question is that enough to make a difference in the stream ecosystem? As part of our work in Little Rock Creek and other parts of the state, we've made recommendations to the legislature that below 10%, we don't think we're going to have issues. When we get above 15 or 20% in differences, we probably are experiencing stream flow, stream ecosystem issues. So at this point, we see single digits. It's not raising major areas of concern for us, but it does warrant continued monitoring. And once we get a groundwater model in this area, we can really look at the differences overall that total irrigation has had.
Mr. Meckel,
just-
we are reached the
Okay.
conclusion of that 10 minutes. Please finish up.
Yep, so this is just the last slide, sort of reiterating those points. And again, just wanted to underscore that, you know, the work that we have ahead of us is to develop a groundwater model, and we'll be building on the efforts of others as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, anyone, if you have questions for Mr. Meckel, please wait till the end of the meeting. And if there's not time, please forward them to Mr. Stark. And at this point, we will turn to Mr. Stroom from the MPCA.
Okay, are you seeing my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, I didn't hit the share button here. There.
There we are.
Okay, great. Mr. Chair Weber and members, thank you for giving us a space on your agenda today. I'll try to go quick here to stay within our time slot. This front picture here is a photo of the Straight River at Highway 71, and that's where most of the data that I'll talk about today regarding nitrate was collected. This is the area of the river where there's the most historical nitrate data, so that's helpful in being able to look at trends. I did initiate some monitoring sites upstream from here too, but they didn't have the initial data that this site did to make as many comparisons. Just a second, trying to get over to the other screen. Okay. So as Jason mentioned, the Straight River is a very heavily groundwater fed system. It's part of the Pineland Sands Aquifer, which is a large surficial aquifer in this very sandy surficial geology area. And Jason also mentioned, I think, that 93 to 97% of the Straight River's flow is groundwater. And that's from their recent study that he showed. These are just a couple pictures of a couple of those springs. You can see that the Straight River really doesn't freeze over in winter because of that groundwater input. That groundwater is actually warmer than what surface water generally is in the winter, so it doesn't generally freeze. The picture on the left, that left channel is actually the spring flowing into the main channel on the right side of the picture there. And then on the right side, there's groundwater emerging from a hill slope, the toe of the hill slope into the river. I'm standing in the river taking this picture. Anyhow, that's just a couple. There's many, many locations along the Straight River that have springs. Some of them aren't visual coming into the stream from the banks, but are actually bubbling up from within the stream bed itself. Pretty neat to see that. So the motivation for this monitoring that I have been doing for a number of years is that the Straight River has a cold water dissolved oxygen impairment. The biology is still meeting our state standards for cold water streams, but the dissolved oxygen does not always meet that. So the stream is on our federally listed impairment list for the state. Excess nutrients are often involved in dissolved oxygen problems of streams. This area has a known elevated nitrate concentration in the local surficial aquifer here. And so it was logical to do some monitoring, particularly for nitrate in the river, to see if that might be involved in the dissolved oxygen issues. Phosphorus also generally plays a part in that, but in this particular setting, nitrate is the more logical nutrient to be coming from the landscape around the river. So as I mentioned, there was some existing data at Highway 71 that was from 2004 to 2010. The latter part of that was from the first cycle of the Crow Wing River Watershed IW, Intensive Watershed Monitoring project. And then I collected 2 subsequent data sets, and those were multi-year data sets, and there was about a 5-year interval of no monitoring in between these 3 data sets. So these 3 data sets are what we're going to be comparing in the study. And then I also did some landscape assessment. That's what we normally do in the stressor identification process, and looking at impaired streams is just to see what kind of human activity is going on in the landscape that might be affecting the streams. For nitrate, that can be coming from agricultural fertilizers, human and animal wastes. Can be coming from an industrial effluent where that's applicable. And in the Straight Rivers watershed, much of the land is in row crops, especially in these later years. There's very little animal ag. There's a modest number of residences. There's a very small town of Osage, which is on the shore of the Straight Lake, and there's no wastewater effluent dischargers. So that being said, the row crop agriculture is the most likely scenario of where excess nitrogen might be coming from. And so I did a GIS analysis of that and quantified irrigated acreage increases from 92 to 2021. And my finding was that there was a significant, as Jason showed, there was a significant increase in irrigated acreage over the last 20 or 30 years. This is a map of the Straight subwatershed outlined in black there in that left photo with all the ag fields. The fields are color coded to when they initially showed up, the year. But I'll point you to the graph on the right that shows the amount of acreage under irrigated row crops from 92 on the left to 2022 on the right. And you can see there was a substantial increase, especially kind of in that 2004 to 2012 period. I believe that's probably related to commodity prices. They were very high in the 2010-2012 period. And over this period, there was about a doubling of irrigated ag in the Straight subwatershed. Just quickly, these are my sampling locations. They were all below Straight Lake. It appears that some definite denitrification happens in Straight Lake because the stream flow going into the lake has a much higher concentration than the outflow. So that's just a kind of an interesting fact to keep in mind. But again, my monitoring site's on the very far right there. I looked at our IWM monitoring sites that had numerous monitoring efforts at them. Those are all shown in pink there on the left map. The Straight River is basically in the center there. That green dot is the Highway 71 site. On the right is the nitrate concentrations that were the average nitrate concentrations found in those various sites. And you can see over there on the very right, the Straight River is very much an anomaly compared to the regional norm. The Shell River there you see in the middle is somewhat elevated. That actually receives water from the Straight River. This is kind of the big takeaway from the project. This is the comparison of those 3 data sets. The orange is that first data set from 2004 to 2010. You can see there's definitely a seasonal pattern to the nitrate concentration in the river. It actually is highest in the winter and lowest in midsummer. The blue is the 2015-2016 data, and the green is the 2020 to 22 data. And I did perform statistics on this, and there was a very statistically significant difference in that first data set to the mid data set, a definite increase in nitrate in the river. And it looks like that has continued in 2020 to 2022, although not as much of an increase. There was not a statistical significant increase in those latter 2 data sets. So just in conclusion, there's a known strong groundwater surface water connectivity in this river. The area is recognized as having groundwater sensitivity to pollution and elevated nitrate levels. The surrounding streams have lower intensity or no agriculture and much lower nitrate concentrations. And an increase in river nitrate occurred correspondingly with increased row crop agriculture. So kind of the big, bold conclusions are that it's likely that the agricultural system has been increasingly influencing river water quality, what we call eutrophication via a groundwater pathway. And secondly, that this understanding could be improved by two things. One would be monitoring groundwater nitrate for trends. And then, as Jason said, modeling of the groundwater movement to the river channel. There may be differences in how much water is coming from different parts of that subwatershed, and knowing that might be important for managing in the future. And I was not able to uncover any groundwater nitrate monitoring in the subwatershed. I tried to see if there was any, and it didn't appear that there has been any. MPCA would not be the agency that would be collecting that data, since this is an ag area. So those two things would be an important step going forward to understanding this whole situation better. So that's my final statement.
Thank
there.
you, Mr. Stroom. And again, we're to the end of the time period here. So if anyone has any questions, save them till the end, or please forward them to Mr. Stark. Jim, anything else from you at this point?
Mr. Chair, no, thank you. We're moving on now to shorter topics, 5 minutes each, which are considerations for the legislature for the upcoming session. So with that, we'll just turn the next presentation over to Rob Sipp. Rob is the director of the Red River Water Management Board. So Rob, with that, it's on to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Weber, and thank you for time on the agenda. So today I want to talk about funding for the Flood Hazard Mitigation Program. And just for a refresher, the Flood Hazard Mitigation Program started in 1988. And it's been in existence for about 36 years. The funds are passed through to local government by DNR. And since 1988, about $578 million has been allocated to local governments through the program. This does not include some disaster and general fund allocations to the program. But over all those years, the average allocation is about $21 million per allocation. Again, that's statewide. Bonding for the program did not occur in 2016, 2019, 2021, 2022, and 2024. So we have some missing years in the equation there. DNR and the governor's recommendations for the Flood Hazard Mitigation Program funds are not meeting the demands of local government and have not for years. In particular, the governor's request in 2024 for the program was $6 million. And so we're not sure what you can get for $6 million, because some of these projects can cost up to $60 million. And so we recommend that the current known need list for funding of the program be funded. Right now it's at about $139 million as of July 2024. This is 23 projects across the whole state, both watershed district projects and city projects. And it's a fraction of the state budget. And this is only going to grow, we believe, with the results of the 2024 summer flooding events all across the state. Another recommendation we have is that the Bowser Water Storage Program could be adjusted to be statewide. Regarding permitting, some of our projects up in the Red River Valley have had to get up to 18 permits and approvals at all levels, local, state, and federal. For projects in our funding process up in the Red River Valley, permitting and environmental review costs is at about $4.4 million, or 30% of non-construction costs. And one thing we run up against is that agencies continually ask for more information, and the goal line keeps changing. We have one project recently that stalled out and may not proceed at all due to a rare wetland being found kind of at the 11th hour. And approximately about $800,000 has been spent on this project that we probably will never see anything result from it, unfortunately. And so we have another issue. We have a 1998 flood mediation agreement, which I can't get into many details, but it does kind of hold us to a higher standard. There is in statute a provision that allows up to 75% cost share for our projects, but we're having difficulty getting to that 75%. So kind of the key ask or request here is that streamlining of permitting and environmental review processes is warranted and needs to be done and addressed by the legislature. Regarding planning, we believe we don't need any more planning up in the Red River Valley in particular. We do have a 20% flow reduction strategy for the main stem Red River. We've had that since 2011, and we're working towards that with North Dakota and several other partners. So the ask here is that, or the request is that a plan of action should be developed by the legislature regarding short and long-term funding of the flood hazard mitigation program. So just a couple things to wrap up regarding the projects that we have in the works and what it actually gets you at the end of the day. Once our projects are constructed, for this round of projects, it would be 100,000 acre-feet of water storage, new water storage on the landscape, approximately 1,500 acres of, or 15,000 acres of wetland and grassland being created or restored, 75 miles of stream being created or restored, just over 17,000 pounds of sediment reductions annually, 16,000 pounds of phosphorus reductions annually, and 117,000 pounds of nitrogen reductions annually. And lastly, return on investment according to FEMA and the National Institute of Building Sciences. Every $1 invested in hazard mitigation saves $6. So with that, I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Sipp. And with that, we will go on to Mr. Scott Sparlin, Director of the Minnesota River Congress, and his 5-minute presentation.
Thank you, Co-Chairs Weber and Hemmingson Yeager. My name is Scott Sparlin. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition for a Clean Minnesota River, Coordinator Facilitator for the Minnesota River Congress. I live in the heart of the Minnesota Valley in New Ulm and Brown County. The organizations I work for have been advocating on behalf of clean water in our state's namesake river for the past 36 years. In 1988, an extensive study of the Minnesota River began at the direction of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, called the Minnesota River Assessment Project. After 2 years of comprehensive scientific study, it revealed what firsthand observers had already intuitively anticipated: a severely polluted river system. Subsequently, in 1990, Minnesota Governor Arne Carlson directed the MPCA to begin a 2-year planning process called the Minnesota River Implementation Project. This process was designed to create and develop actions which would result in the improvement of water quality conditions in the main stem and 13 tributary watersheds. Those assembled by the MPCA represented a diverse cross-section of stakeholders and citizens called the Citizens Advisory Committee. After 2 years of scientific presentations and extensive debate, the committee produced a set of 10 recommendations for action. One of the 10 recommendations was to establish a Minnesota River Commission, whose charge it would be to ensure government accountability and citizen participation in meeting Minnesota River cleanup goals. The first charge of this new commission would be establishing goals for the cleanup effort. It's hoped that this report and the work of the Minnesota River Assessment Project will guide and expedite the planning efforts of the commission. The board would also provide a broad oversight of major agency activities related to the Minnesota River and facilitate interagency cooperation. Further, the board would evaluate the effectiveness of expenditures. They would also advocate for and educate people about the river restoration effort. Another responsibility would be to hold an annual event on the state of the river. The commission would not be involved in the day-to-day operation of agencies, but would have access to information and the decision makers within those agencies. In addition to being accountable to the citizens of Minnesota, the commission would also report to the governor and the legislature. In 1994, Senator Dennis Frederickson introduced a bill in the Minnesota legislature, of which I testified on behalf, to establish the Minnesota River Commission. The components of that bill are reflected in the Citizens Advisory Committee recommendation, which are attached to this document. Although it has been 30 years since that time, many of the elements and personnel included need to be options considered today. During that same session of the legislature of which that bill was introduced, another bill had been introduced to create a different entity, which membership consisted exclusively of one county commissioner from each of the 36 counties in the Minnesota River Basin. The state was quite willing at the time to turn the responsibility over to the counties to see what they would do about the pollution challenges the river had at the time. Subsequently, the county entity structure idea passed and the Minnesota River Commission bill failed. The Minnesota River Basin Joint Powers Board then was created and signed into law. Fast forward to 2014, after 20 years of existence, 2 years of planning, and even producing a way forward with funding options, the counties decided to call it quits and turn the responsibility of reducing pollution and damages caused in the Minnesota River watershed over to the state of Minnesota. After that, there was no collective response from the state of Minnesota to address the continuing decline of water quality and quantity conditions, which remains today. This brings us to now. We have reached a water management crisis in the Minnesota River watershed. Due to land use practices, both urban and rural, we continue to experience increased losses to infrastructure, business, recreation, and a host of other societal costs, which are at an unacceptable rate, putting many Minnesotans at various degrees of risk. Exacerbating this condition is the climatic trend and future prediction of increased rainfalls in short periods of time. Flood rates from summer rainfall now contribute more to flooding than normal spring snowmelt. The combination of all these factors leads first to small and medium-sized tributary stream bank erosion. Then the dislodged sediments combined with the increased rate flows enable even more sediments and nutrients to be delivered to our lakes, major tributaries, main stems, where they flow downstream to the Mississippi River, Lake Pepin, and ultimately the Gulf of Mexico. The time to get serious about this at a state level is long past due. This is why we feel it is time to create a Minnesota River Management Board that reflects a true cross-section of the greater public representation than what was attempted prior. The makeup of this management board is certainly up for discussion and debate. However, our network believes strongly that citizen membership should make up at least half of the voting membership. This was clearly reflected in our feedback we received from our 16th Minnesota River Congress event held in June of this year. I will close my testimony today by adding that the Water Quality and Storage Program, which is administered by the Board of Water and Soil Resources, is receiving high levels of interest from landowners in the Minnesota Basin and will be asking for $50 million per biennium appropriations from the legislature. Our network urges the members of this committee to support the program and the request to the fullest extent possible. Thank you for this opportunity, and I will take any questions that you have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Sparlin. We are to the end of your time period, so we will now turn to Robin Dwight from the Keep It Clean Initiative. Ms. Dwight.
I'm attempting to share my screen.
We can see your screen.
All right, thank you very much. Can't see it. I guess that's it. All right. Well, First of all, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I would like to thank the honorable representatives and senators who are here and other committee members and the chairman for allowing me to talk about Keep It Clean. So first of all, I just wanted to let you know that I'm the president of the Upper Red Lake Area Association here this afternoon on behalf of the Keep It Clean Coalition. And I'm going to read my notes because it's easier for me that way. So this is a quote: "Every winter, hundreds of thousands of anglers head for the frozen waters to fish. Most anglers clean up after themselves, but some don't. And it's their behavior that was the impetus for a new litter on ice law the Minnesota legislature passed earlier this year." That's a quote from the DNR in 2023. The Keep It Clean Coalition is the driving force behind the clean ice legislation, prohibiting the placement of garbage and human waste on or under the ice of state waters, with a $100 fine for offenders as the critical first part of protecting Minnesota's ice-covered waters from the leftovers of human activity. But more must be done. Just close this a little bit. Through the hard work of volunteers and with the amazing partnerships we have been part of, our coalition has attracted members representing thousands of lakes around the state, eager to take on the Keep It Clean challenge. We also have a website which we can direct people to see what we've been doing over the last few years. We developed education campaigns, participated in media events, shared free resources, and through grant funding and donations provided signage and waste removal support at private lake accesses to public waters. We have shown that our efforts are necessary, but our resources are limited. Minnesotans tell us they need infrastructure to handle the waste products of a growing ice camping and winter angling phenomenon. Although people and their pets can now camp and recreate for extended amounts of time on frozen waters, there are few options for safe and legal waste removal on shore. And I'll just draw your attention briefly to the map that's been created by Mike Hurst of Lake of the Woods Soil and Water Conservation District, who is highlighting the members that have joined the Keep It Clean Coalition, and that those numbers are growing. And he's working on making this map interactive, adding it to our website, so you can see the reach that we have developed as an organization. The DNR fisheries graph to the left shows the growing disparity between winter and summer anglers over time at Lake of the Woods. We presume the data is similar for other large walleye destinations across the state. As you can see, the popularity of winter angling is increasing steadily. According to DNR Creel survey data, there were about 65,000 trips to Upper Red Lake in 3 months of 2022 to 2023. There were over 80,000 trips in 2021 to 2022. Mille Lacs Lake and Lake of the Woods experienced similar numbers, and that's often weather dependent. That translated to over 6 million angler hours from December to February on these 3 lakes alone. In 2024, Representative Andrew Myers of Minnetonka chief authored our Keep It Clean Programs Grants Bill in the House, House File 3662, and Senator Eric Putnam chief authored it in the Senate, Senate File 3957. Although the bill did not pass last session, we are grateful to be working with Representative Myers and many others on both sides of the aisle to reintroduce that important Keep It Clean legislation this session that will serve all Minnesotans and protect our state waters. And there's a link to the bill if you'd care to take a look at that. We believe a shelter and ice recreation program like the existing DNR boat and water safety program is the best way to teach the public the importance of caring for the environment and being safe during winter angling and recreation. We also recognize that small communities need incentives and opportunities to build and upgrade winterized human waste removal infrastructure, so visitors by the tens of thousands are not overwhelming local services. To that end, we are prepared to work with legislators and organizations who share our concerns and support our efforts to get the Keep It Clean program and funding bill passed this session. Clean ice means clean water. We pledge to help protect and preserve this valuable resource now and for generations to come. So I thank you for listening to my presentation, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Dwight. We are right close to the end of your presentation, so I'll ask anyone if they have questions to save it to the end of this meeting or forward them to Mr. Stark. At this point, I will turn it over to Jake Wildman, President of Minnesota Irrigators Association, for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Weber. Mr. Stark, all committee members, we appreciate this opportunity to testify again. My name is Jake Wildman. I'm the president of the Irrigator Association of Minnesota. I live in the Glenwood area, Bonanza Valley. We irrigate here in the Bonanza Valley. I just want to thank all committee members or this committee for coming out to visit some of our members' farms this year. We really appreciate that and hope you found that valuable. And we're able to learn a few things over the course of the 2-day tour. Just some things. I have Dan Whitney, another IAM board member, with me today, but I'm just going to touch on a few things that IAM is focusing on moving forward here. Just some issues that we are facing. Number one is we're going to continue to work with the DNR on looking how to create some efficiencies and streamlining the water appropriation permit process. When you look at transferring of permits from one generation to the other, or from one farmer to another, we want to look at that process a little bit. We have a few members throughout the state that have been waiting for a permit approval for 5, 6, 7 years. And we just feel that we can find ways to make that process a little more efficient working with the DNR. The second one is we are monitoring and watching what is occurring up in the White Earth area with a member of IAM and the permit process that's going on up there, which I'm sure you all are aware of. Number 3 is we'd like to look forward to working with the consultant that the DNR just hired up in the Little Rock Creek area. Members that were on that tour understood the situation that's going on up there. So DNR just did announce that they recently did hire a consultant. So growers in that area will have an opportunity to work with that consultant and figure out a solution that is going on up there. And then lastly, analyzing these Straight River reports that you guys have just heard from the DNR and the PCA. So we'll continue to look through them and ask some questions and have conversation with both agencies on those reports. And with that, I will turn it over to Dan. Like I said, Dan is a fellow IAM board member, and I'll let him introduce himself and make a few comments to the committee. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake, and the Water Policy Subcommittee. As Jake mentioned, my name is Dan Whitney, and I'm a board member and technical advisor to both the IAM and Central Minnesota irrigators. I begin by agreeing with the DNR's finding that the use of groundwater for irrigation is not showing a decline in the stream flow of the Straight River. However, the IAM and CMI take issue with the nutrient study report by the PCA. In particular, the lack of consideration toward potential sources of nitrate to the river other than irrigated agriculture. A recently implemented 4-year IAM-funded study, of which we are 1 year into, is showing the likelihood for nitrate leaching or contributions from septic system drain fields, the 360 acres of riparian forest adjacent to the river, 600 acres of riparian wetlands within the river, and animal waste inputs from wildlife as potential contributors of nitrate. Yet the MPCA fails to recognize these and other potential sources and focuses the blame on irrigators. The CMI is finalizing a letter to the MPCA that presents these issues, our study findings, and requests that the report be revised. And Jim, I'll provide a copy of the letter to you to distribute accordingly if you'd like. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitney. And we have about a minute and a half left. Are there any questions for the Irrigators Association folks? I don't see any hands being raised. Representative Fisher?
Thank you, Chair Weber. Appreciate it. Quick question I had is I don't remember what the issue is around the White Earth area. If I could get a little bit more details as what that's about.
Yeah, Representative Fisher. Could I get in contact with your staff and yourself about it? It's kind of a lengthy. There's multiple issues that are going on up there, and for the sake of time, I think we can if we could connect. I would be more than happy to give you an update on the situation that's going on up there, if that's okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members, I'll work with Jake. It's a complicated issue, and
yep,
I'll try to get you a brief summary of some of the things that are going on.
Yep.
There. Thank you,
Representative Fisher. I have a nice outline, kind of what the issues that we're facing. So I would be more than happy to look at that and send that over your way. So we will for sure connect if you'd like. So
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
I see no other hands raised at this point, and so thank you very much. And we will turn next to Jeff Forster from Minnesota Lakes and Rivers. Please proceed.
Thank you. A presentation here that hopefully I can get up quickly. Thank you, Chair Weber and members of the committee. My name is Jeff Forster. I am Executive Director of Minnesota Lakes and Rivers Advocates. We represent over 500 lake associations in the state and lake home and cabin owners across Minnesota. I appreciate the opportunity to present on two items of interest. One is legislative, so the funding for aquatic invasive plant management grants, and then Jim Stark asked me to talk a little bit about the wakeboard boat issue, so I'll try and cover those things quickly here. So AIS funding, there's the money that goes out to the counties, there's DNR budget, but then there's also the AIS surcharge on a 3-year boat registration. It used to be $5 in 2019. We were advocating that it go up to $20. And it was set at $10.60. So this year, we'll be advocating that it be raised to $25 on a 3-year boat registration. And this kind of shows part of the funding. Part of the funding from that is directed to management grants for AIS on lakes, goes out to local governments, lake associations, tribes, really to try and protect access to the lakes from aquatic invasive plants. Lake associations, the need for the increases, lake associations are contributing money to, in addition to the money that they get from the grant, there's often a match. Or they're paying this on their own. The other problem is that with the kind of unstable nature of this grant, where some years it's zero, some years it's 450. One year it had one-time money for 1.2 million, which was great. But any kind of long-term program to really dig into the science, do a pilot program, that's impossible because you never know what the funding is going to be from one year to the next. The other piece is the lake associations are pretty much at an unsustainable level and contributing towards this. Really, lake associations are being asked to fund as near as, our estimate is up to $10 million a year in lake management costs to manage the public waters. So imagine if your home was adjacent to a state park and the state's solution to managing the state park was that the people who live next door to it should pay for removing garbage, doing buckthorn removal, any of the management tasks that are required on public parks, basically, which is what our lakes are. The wakeboat issue today, the North American Lake Managers magazine came out and the cover story was on wakeboard boats. We're working with a state or a national group of people that are in my role and other states on this issue. It's an incredibly popular sport. It's really growing in popularity. It is a strong economic driver for marina owners and boat dealers. So that's all to the good. It's the kind of thing where the boats are only going 11 knots, 11 miles an hour. And so somebody my age and somebody in their early teens can participate in it. It's not as high impact on the body. It's not as dangerous, but there's problems. These boats can create wakes up to 5 or 6 feet high. So obviously other users that are, small fishing boats or paddle boards or kayaks or pontoons can get swamped. There's kind of a host of issues that have been developing over the last few years. Our solution, and we are working with the National Marine Manufacturers Association, water sports industry, was to get good science. What is the nature of these wakes? How long do they have to travel through the water before they are no longer a threat to shoreline? How deep does the prop thrust go? What are the ecological impacts of wakes and prop thrust on lakes? First year, we were able to fund the first phase of a study at the St. Anthony Falls lab. That's completed. That information is out. They found that a wake produced by enhanced wake watercraft has to travel about 500 feet to get to the type of wake, the energy and dynamics of a wake from a regular runabout at 200 feet. So 500 seems to be about that magic number that these boats need to be from shore or from other boaters. They're have investigated the prop thrust and disturbance characteristics. So the ability of the prop thrust from these boats to reanimate sediments in the lake bed or destroy aquatic plants is very high. They're also a significant transporter of aquatic invasive species. A study at the DNR found that they're the highest risk watercraft because they have these large ballast tanks that can't be completely emptied. And they hold a lot of residual water, and they're under deck, so they're out of sunlight and they can stay cooler. So things like zebra mussel veligers or starry stonewort bulbules or other viruses, things like that, tend to survive better on these boats. They're harder to clean. This kind of, our idea was to get good science and then create a watercraft operating and certification program to train people in the best practices based on the science. So 500 feet from shore, 20 feet deep. It seems to be about where the second phase of the SAFL study will come out. And then increased AIS prevention actions that people can take. And then educate people. And right now the DNR is working on putting together the training modules for this program, which was passed last session. The other solution is local ordinances. Local governments can pass an ordinance about use of a water body within their boundaries. It has to be approved by the DNR. Caribou Lake up in Cook County passed such an ordinance, and the DNR approved it last spring. Maybe that's a solution. Part of the difficulty is that you could end up with different ordinances in different lakes in different counties all across the state. Wisconsin is pursuing this, and they have over 30 new ordinances across the state regulating wakeboard boats. I can see if there's any questions. I know we're short on time, but here's my contact information, or I can share with Jim Stark.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We have approximately 15 minutes before the meeting is scheduled to adjourn. I will go back to the members. Are there any questions that you have for any of our presenters today? Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got lots of questions, but you don't have time for all of my questions. And I think you restrict me on how many questions I get to ask, if I remember right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Oh, no,
thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, Jeff, Champlin and Coon Rapids and Anoka, there's this little 6-mile stretch of the Mississippi River. It's about 1,000 feet across between shore to shore. There is a growing concern of these wake boats, and it's not just coming, it's coming from everybody who lives along the river, including the mayor of Champlin, as well as people like Jeff Weaver and Anoka, concerned about how the wakeboard, these waves are taking out the shoreline, which it is. I've seen it firsthand. So are you going to propose that 500-foot piece be statutory language, Jeff? I mean, is this just a best practice kind of thing you're talking about? Because we put the signs up on this side of the river and it's still not working, and something needs to be done on that end of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a great deal of sense. We thought the first step right, is get the best practices. And then through the boater education and training, educate every boater in the state on this issue. So they will learn about the impact that these boats can have. I mean, typically these boats are, I mean, I think they start at 150,000 and go up from there. My daughters went with friends from their school up to a cabin on Gull Lake. And they had a wake surfing boat. And I said, okay, so let me see if I can guess how your day went. You woke up like 10, mom made breakfast for you, you headed down to the boat. As you went out the door, dad said, okay, stay away from shore, don't get too shallow, keep the music down, blah, 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 blah. And you said, yeah, whatever. You went out to the boat and your distance from shore and the depth that you were operating in never crossed your minds once. And they said, yeah, that's pretty much how it went. And these are kids that wear their seatbelts, right? And they don't smoke and they follow the rules, but they're not. So I'm thinking that a lot of it could be solved with that first step and then see where we are a year or two down the road. But in the meantime, we're educating a base of people that know that this is a concern. I also spoke to a woman who has a wake surf boat on Mille Lacs, big environmentalist. You know, I met her in an event. We crossed paths, and you know, the idea of these boats transporting like zebra mussels had never crossed her mind. And she said, "What are you working on?" I said, "Wakeboard boats and zebra mussels, and the ballast tanks can hold the veligers for like 7 days, and they're just high risk." And she looked at me, her face kind of falling, and said, "Oh, so we have our boat in Minnetonka and we took it up to Gull Lake and we could be the ones that introduce zebra mussels into Gull Lake." And I said, "Well, no, it's probably not you. You know, I was at a party and I didn't want to destroy your night, but yeah, definitely she could have." So people don't know. Even the owners of the boats don't know. And the people buying the boats that get the training from industry aren't the ones necessarily using them. So, yeah, so that's kind of what we're thinking is the education piece first, but get those numbers in the education so people know 500 feet from shore, 20 feet deep or greater. It's even possible with these boats, you know, they have navigation maps on. We could create a layer that literally showed the boater when they were at least 500 feet from shore. They could see it on their dashboard. It would cost pennies per boat to implement, right? So there's solutions out there, I think. Regulation is hard because it's like, okay, you take a picture of a boat and you say, oh, you were less than 20 feet deep. Well, are you 5 feet this way, 5 feet this way? Well, what's the meaning of a $150 or $200 ticket to someone whose boat is burning $100 in gas an hour?
So,
right? So hard to enforce.
Yeah, my residents, Jeff, don't care about that piece. They're tired of seeing the degradation of their shorelines, and so that's. I mean, you're going to have that balance on it. I just was specifically asking. Sounds to me like you guys are just going to keep going the education route. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have 3 other hands up. I'd like to go to them and each do a question first. If you have more questions, Senator Hoffman, we'll come back to you. Representative Hemmingson Yeager.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Ms. Dwight with the Keep It Clean initiative. I noticed last year's bill doesn't have, just as dots in the appropriation. So I just wondered how much is the ask and if Keep It Clean Coalition is registered as a nonprofit?
The Keep It Clean is a group of individual stakeholders that came together to act as volunteers to get this going. So we're not a 501c3 or 4. And our ask initially, when we put our heads together and did our research, was for $3 million statewide, knowing that to initially get a good program running in your community based on your needs, which vary across the state. Every lake has its own specific needs. In my area and working with people from Lake of the Woods and Mille Lacs Lake, through grant funding, we used about $700,000 to over the last 3 years to be able to bring education and awareness, some resources and infrastructure, and then get the regulation and enforcement by way of the legislation. So thank you for that question. We're asking for a lot.
Thank you. Representative Schultz.
Thank you. My question kind of goes back to Mr. Stroom at the MPCA. And my question really has to do with the report that they've provided by comparison to what we saw with the DNR on the Straight River. And just kind of curious, you know, what process did the MPCA go through to consider other sources of nitrates beyond that from production agriculture? And, you know, it was mentioned in the reports that we even just discussed today. It could be riparian forests, it could be atmospheric nitrogen, it could be, you know, the septic drain fields in the area. You know, how did we come to the conclusion, and where are we coming from on this question?
Yeah, thanks for that. I guess the one, to me, relatively strong piece of evidence is just the correlation of the nitrate in the river increased at the exact time that the irrigated acreage of the row crops increased. So it was like a simultaneous occurrence. So that would be one piece of evidence. Other things like the atmospheric deposition, that's kind of why I compared all those surrounding areas that were in that one map and all those pink dots. Those would be receiving the exact same atmospheric deposition, and those, almost all of those, have extremely low nitrate levels. Actually, it's generally below the lab detection limit of nitrate in those systems, and they're very close by. So atmospheric deposition couldn't explain it. There are septic systems, and they probably contribute a small amount of nitrate to the groundwater. That would be something that might be able to be determined if we did if we had better modeling, groundwater modeling, in that area. So that would be another reason that groundwater model would be a helpful thing to have in the future. Statewide, there was a study that looked at nitrate sources in Minnesota for the nutrient reduction strategy project, and they did tease out SSTS sourced nitrate compared to agriculture, and agriculture just completely dwarfed the amount coming from septic systems. And again, that comparison I made with the surrounding watersheds, all those watersheds also have, residences with septic systems, and they aren't showing those to be sources of nitrate to those nearby rivers. So I guess all those are pieces of evidence that would point to agriculture being probably the major source of the nitrate.
Okay. Well, thank you for your answer. I just, I'd encourage, more public engagement on your nutrient study report, and then just kind of working with the irrigators on this. I think that this is a contentious point as we move forward.
Yeah, I actually have a meeting set up with one of the irrigators consultants and my manager this fall to talk about the study. So yeah, we are going to be doing that.
Very good, thank you. Representative Jacob.
Yeah, thank you. I think Isaac Schultz essentially asked the same question that I had. I am concerned, Mr. Stroom, that we tend to find what we're looking for, and if we're simply have predetermined that agricultural activity is the cause of the problem, we're not going to look for any other potential causes. So I think the lens looked a little bit too focused. I'm not saying that isn't actually the issue, and I also didn't get from your chart. How many parts per million did you see in the concerned area? How many parts per million of nitrates was it at the high end?
As you saw, it depends seasonally. So the high point is in the winter. At Highway 71, there was about 3.5 milligrams per liter concentration.
Put that in terms of parts per million, like when we're testing. Yeah, I'm used to down here in Southeast.
Yeah, parts per million and milligrams per liter are the same thing. So the drinking water standard is 10 milligrams per liter. Like I said, this is like 3.5 at its high point.
Oh, I've understood that naturally occurring can be up to 4. So I mean,
well, I guess
at 3
this is
parts per million, that doesn't hardly sound like an issue.
Yeah, it's getting fairly close to the nitrate can actually be toxic to organisms, so it's not just the eutrophication issue that's sapping dissolved oxygen. And MPCA has been doing some studies on nitrate toxicity, and it's not all that far from getting to levels that we've found to be toxic to especially the aquatic macroinvertebrates, more so than fish. But of course, those are food source for fish, so fish would be affected eventually anyhow.
In drinking water, they consider 10 parts per million to be under that to be safe. So, and we've also found that up to 4 parts per million is naturally occurring. So I mean, it just seems like you're
so getting back to my comparison regionally, I think that's why that's really important, because you can see there was oodles of monitoring stations on many rivers immediately surrounding the Straight River, and they were all at like 0.02 or 0.05 generally, which are the detection limits for the labs. So many times less than
and you also
4.
said that this happens the highest in the winter. Isn't there nitrogen that comes in snow?
There would be, but that wouldn't be getting into the groundwater in the winter because the ground's frozen.
I thought this was a stream monitoring.
Right, but there wouldn't be any way for the
Wouldn't the
nitrate
snow
in the
fall and drain into the river, melt into the river?
Oh, but that would be occurring in like April, May, not January.
Well, the snow that falls in the river is going to immediately melt. I just think
all
I think it should be,
those things could be calculated, but that would be that would be an
I just would ask that
extremely
you look
trivial.
farther than just agriculture, and it just seems like you're really getting down to nitpicking at 3 parts per million or less. So, okay, that's my comments. Thank you.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Fisher, one last question. Hope you're on mute. You're on mute, Representative.
Thank you. My question would be, I know that there's been the testing for the nitrates in the area there. Are there any test results showing what pesticides might be in the water or the components that break down from the pesticides? Is any of that in the testing that's been done by the MPCA, or is that being done by the Department of Agriculture?
That's being done by the Department of Ag. I think they reported on some of that in their township groundwater testing. So they do have a report that shows what they found in those monitoring efforts. I believe they have found some pesticide in those, but I'm not sure if it's at concerning levels or anything. So I would refer you to that report for that information.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Stark.
I promised our friend, Ms. Eschenauer, that she could have a minute to talk about something that's really important, the state drinking water plan. So if we could give her a minute, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Very good.
Annie.
Ms. Eschenauer.
Well, thank you very much for making time for this quick announcement. I just want to make sure, well, first of all, Jim, can you see my slide?
No.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm having trouble getting my slide up.
While she's doing that, I'll just mention that there is an op-ed piece in the Strib from Dr. Peter Clow, who's been involved in this, but he has compliments this process and has some suggestions. I'll send that out to the members. Now we can see your slides.
Okay, and you're seeing the first slide there?
Yeah, the Minnesota logo.
Oh, no, that's not it.
And while we work on this, in addition, we missed some things today. There are others who would like to testify, and you know, I'll be in touch after the elections and try to schedule a meeting for us in November to talk about these in more depth and other things. And Tanny, thanks. We can see your slides.
Yeah. Thanks for your patience, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Tanny Eschnauer, and I manage the Water Policy Center at the Minnesota Department of Health. And I'm just here to provide you with an update on direction that you gave us to develop a statewide drinking water plan. We're calling it the Minnesota Drinking Water Action Plan. And your guidance was to develop public health policies and an action plan to address threats to safe drinking water, including the development of a statewide plan for protecting drinking water based on recommendations from the Future of Drinking Water report. And that's a report that was developed at the University of Minnesota, the Humphrey School, in collaboration with the Water Resources Center. And I just want to give you a heads up that we have recently completed version 2 of the plan. We had a time where we are asking the public, Minnesotans, to weigh in on the plan, to provide their reactions to that. We had a good response to that. Our vision for the state is that we have safe drinking water, sufficient drinking water, and equitable access everywhere in Minnesota. We've identified a number of risks and challenges that we believe we will face over the 10-year duration of this plan. So from 2024 to 2034, you can see in the slide the 5 high-level goals. In the plan, we include strategies to address those goals and specific actions. And we have the draft plan currently up on our website. If you take a picture of that QR code, you can that will take you to the website with the plan. We're going to keep that up as we work to incorporate the comments that we most recently received. And then just to let you know that we plan to release the plan in early January for consideration. And if you have comments on the plan, you are welcome to pass those to me. And my contact information is on this final slide. So thanks again for the time, the quick minute to update you on our progress.
Thank you, Ms. Eschenauer. And Mr. Stark, any final comments from you?
Mr. Chair and members, thank you so much for being here today. I know it's a busy time. Thanks to those who presented. We covered a lot of ground today. So I hope that we can meet again later on in November and talk about some of these things with respect to legislative initiatives and to cover some of the things we didn't get to at all today. So best wishes to you all in the next couple of weeks, and thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.